Peacock Angel by E.S. Drower, being some account of votaries of a secret cult and their sanctuaries. Chapter 12. The Feast of the First Day. Everywhere is spring, and pastures everywhere, and everywhere the cows' udders are swollen with milk, and the younglings are fostered. Eucritus, Adele 8. It was April the 17th, the 4th of Nisan. Early as we rose, the Yazidi girls had been out on the hills before us to gather bunches of scarlet ranunculus, for no other flower is used for the feast. Above every Yazidi house door in the village, 3 bunches of these vivid flowers had been plastered on with wet mud, heads downwards, one above the entrance, one on each doorpost. Into the clay which held the blossoms in position, fragments of colored eggshell had been pressed, and some householders had besmeared the lintel and doorposts with blood from the sheep or lamb slaughtered on the previous evening. Now, as illustrated by which year this is, 6773, these traditions go before the Christians and the Jews. So everyone was making and receiving gifts of hard-boiled colored eggs. The favorite color was orange, the bright vegetable dye which the women use for their hand-woven mizars, but we saw also purple, green, and a madder color produced by binding onion skins around the eggs when boiling them. None was blue, for blue is a forbidden color to Yazidis, as it is to Mandatans, and no Yazidi woman will wear a blue garment, although she may wear a blue bead or button against the evil eye. We went to Sit Gul's house and found her in bed and very weak, though the fever had lessened. The queening had made her deaf, and even the feast had not roused her. Are they talking about a temporary thing? The tonic water? In spite of the sadness that hung over the family, the entrance to their courtyard was decorated like the rest, and bunches of red had been fixed above the door of every living room. The bees had not been forgotten. A few of the scarlet flowers had been plastered above the apertures through which the bees busily came and went. Their hive was a wonderful affair. It was simply a long reed basket, daubed over with clay and built into the wall of the living room, the wide mouth clayed over, being flush with the outer wall. In the living room, a sack had been thrown over it, lest some of the mud break away and the bees swarm into the room. Doors to the hive were pierced in the exterior of the wall, and it was above these that flowers had been placed. Now, you used to buy, you used to be able to see quinine for sale at the grocery store, and I don't know, could it be because of the side effects of taking too much or something, or that it was one of those things that, they mix in with what's supposed to be heroin. Aisha pressed eggs upon us, as did almost everyone we met. In the square at the entrance of the village, where men and boys lounged, a game was in progress. One player held his egg in his fist with one end showing, and his opponent did the same. When the 2 eggs were knocked lightly together, the loser was he whose egg cracked first. There was a knack in it, and some players had acquired a number of eggs. Rashid sought us out with more eggs, and we went to call upon the chief Awal at his house, after which we returned to the village square. There, a man with a peep show was doing good business. It was a contraption like a hurdy-gurdy. Customers, 2 at a time, sat on a low bench and glued their eyes to eye holes. A light inside illuminated gaudily colored pictures, which unrolled jerkily as the showman turned a handle. He called out the subject of each as he turned Adam and Eve, Sit, Miriam, and Isa, Lady Mary and Jesus, and so on. The pictures were like the sticky results obtained with a penny sheet of transfers in one's youth, just as crude, just as bright. There were views made in Germany, a Turkish battle scene in which fezzes were routing the infidels, the German Kaiser when a young man with his family, and a Saint Mary Magdalene, the beautiful Laila, Saint George and the Dragon, a scene with a suspension bridge, Stambul, Nicholas II, and Caesarina, a child with a kitten, Londra, a scene in the Alps, and others. It was well worth a farthing. We rose, put down the fee for 2 small boys who eagerly took our places and walked on to Bahsani to offer congratulations to our friends there. At Kawal Salman's house, we were greeted by his little son, Hither. I wonder if it means the green one in that language too, whose face was bright with joy, and coffee was served in the upper room. Upon the walls of this, A admired a decoration, very fashionable in the villages, a large rosette of gold tinsel, fashioned like a flower. The girls had made it of the foil in which cigarettes are wrapped. All the young women were resplendent in festival clothing, but we were not to see the full glory of their feast clothes until the 3rd day. Every girl had nosegay, a red ranunculus in her turban, and they insisted merely that A should put a few into her hat. And a Yazidi girl in festival clothing, it's aside from, I guess, necklaces that hang over the headdress and the neck, that sort of thing. Discs with bits hanging off from it. 7, maybe 5 or 3 as well. Very solar. It's hard to tell without the thing. Now, some people, they will practice with an inner side, whatever the outer forms are. So if they're used to being persecuted and overtaken by these various things, they try to maintain their own culture underneath certain names that are of similar category. They connect, and you can see in the Syria, northern Egypt sort of area, that this was a present culture, about 12,000 years ago. So, and of course up into Turkey and stuff. So rain had fallen overnight and had left the world clean and fresh. And today the spirit of spring was upon us all. Everywhere very young creatures were about us, newly born donkeys, and what attractive creatures they can be with their blunt noses and hides as softly fluffy as powder puffs, kept close to staid, grazing mothers. There were half a dozen of them on the grassy slopes below the Kowal's house, kids, lambs, calves, foolish and innocent, hens fussing over broods of yellow chicks. Everywhere there was new life. It is the time for it, said Jadon, indulgent when we lured fowl a little nearer. And yet the Kowal had excused himself and left us to his son, hurrying off with his tambour to the tombs near Bahsani, where we saw him with another Kowal. We paused beside them on our way back to listen to the sad little tune they were playing over the dead. Some women who had been beating their breasts and faces the moment before came forward to us with food from the offerings from the graves. Eat, eat, they invited us, holding out crushed wheat and bread and meat. Some gypsies sat in a dark group amongst the mourners, catching grave offerings, some fragments of which they tossed to their bear that rolled and lolled amongst the tombs. Indignant, the mourning women refused them more, and so, in revenge, some of the gypsy women, well, there's no revenge because somebody won't, give you more of their stuff. One or two of them, handsome wenches, though swarthy and dirty, her tangled hair hanging over their eyes, began to mock them, beating their faces and laughing. Whereat the Yazidi women came at them angrily, and they moved off, the bear shambling after them at the end of a length of chain. The dead, too, had their feast. Not only had the food been set on graves, but scarlet flowers had been plastered on the headstones. The women kissed these and wept. Some clawed at their hair and sobbed, whilst others chanted. All were elderly or old, for girls are not expected to come to the tombs. A boy pointed out several graves of murdered men. Outlaws, he said, pointing to one, killed this man. They met him in the hills and dragged him from his horse and stabbed him. At Rashid's house, we halted to return the visit of Sadiq, his father, but the old man, tired after the journey, was still sleeping. A visitor from Baghdad, however, came forward to greet us in the garden. It was Myrawan's brother, on his way to the Sinjar. His sister, he said, was weary of the south and would soon return to her people. When we reached our little house, we found Awal Rashu there talking to Jadon. As I served tea, I told them that Wanza was said to be returning to the mountains, but I added, I fear she will be in danger there. I was surprised at their reply. Let her die, both said callously. We do not accept that a Yazidi woman should go to Baghdad, Aleppo, and other cities and see foreigners. Let her die, it would be a good thing. I reasoned with them and asked what crime she had committed, that she should die. You yourself told me, I said to one of them, that Sa'id Beg, her husband, threatened her life, and that they were not happy together. Do you then blame her for leaving him? She should not have left him, Qual answered quickly. She was his wife. She had a room of her own, and clothes, and all that she wanted. Jadon said, he is our mirror, and that settled it as far as he was concerned. The Qual told me how Sa'id Beg had killed another wife. They came and told Ibram that his wife Maryam loved a Ghulam, a white slave. Possibly a young man, by the language. I'm not sure. I don't know Kurdish or whatever. He did nothing. They waited. One day, she and the Ghulam sat talking together in the long grass and bushes. They saw them. They went and told Sa'id Beg, Maryam is even now the Ghulam in the long grass. He, our mirror, took his revolver. He came. He shot her 3 times in the belly, and the man escaped. She was bleeding. Her hands were torn, and they dragged her to the castle. And she was still living. Then they finished her with a dagger. After that, Sa'id Beg went after the man, bound him, and shot him also. Now, one finds that if one person commits adultery, it can mess with another, not only with that marriage, but the other marriages to follow. Now, in the Bible, the death penalty is for adultery. You don't find the death penalty for adultery or consensual gay sex in the Quran, although they're probably thought of as more serious. As we were eating lunch, Aisha and her baby arrived, bringing us bul and meat from the Sheikh's house. She mentioned her mother-in-law. She hates me, she sighed. She has said to me, I do not wish to see your face. Your husband killed my daughter. Then she bewailed her loneliness in that tragic house. I am an orphan, she told A, and not of this village. My home is far away, and of my own people there is none near but a sister married in Bahzani. My husband is in prison, and I have no one left but this one. And so saying, she caught him up and kissed him. They both sat on the floor while we finished our meal, the baby chuckling and crowing and dirtying the floor, and at times demanding his mother's never refused breast. I was tired and left A with her. A delighted her by letting her see the room, her dressing gown, nightgown, and toilet things. You have this, said Aisha, picking up the comb. Why then do you need that? Touching the brush. We were invited to tea by Kawal Rashu, who had given us instructions how to find his house. When we arrived, however, he was still out with his tambour, making the tour of the graves, but his wife set mattresses and cushions for us on the well-swept floor. It was a two-roomed house, and in the living room where he, his wife, and babies and a fat puppy lived and slept, there was a fireplace. The other room reached through a doorless entrance, was given over to cocks and hens. Before long, he returned and set about his duties as a host in a very cheerful manner, chatting the while of his travels and his experiences with the English. He heated the water for tea on a Primus stove, burnished till it shone like the sun, and his kettle was no less brightly polished. I use brasseau, he explained with pardonable pride. We used to polish with it when I was in the levees. More visitors awaited us when we got back. Rashid and his father were there with an offering of multicolored eggs, some kreitcha, festival mince pies, and a large plateful of dried figs from their estate in the Sinjar. We told Rashid how charmed we had been that morning to see the beehive decorated, and I mentioned that in England we too once used skips or baskets for our bees, but that now we used wooden hives and sections. His eyes lit up at once, as they always did when he heard of anything of practical good. Batoon, he said to me one day, you ask us many questions. What do we do for this and for that? And we want to ask you many questions. What do you do in your country for this and that? We want to learn. And now he wanted to know all about this modern way of housing the dapas, as the bee is called here. The word means the honeymaker. How was this hive made? How were the sections fitted together, and how removed? When we got back, we could have sent him a picture and tell him exactly how it was shaped, so that he could begin this better way of beekeeping here in Bashika. We kept our promise as far as we could. A sent him a book on beekeeping in the belief that his brother would be able to read and translate it for him. I spoke to the education authorities in Baghdad and communicated with the Ministry of Agriculture, asking them to send a sample hive. I left Baghdad before I heard that they had done so, but a high authority in education assured me that he would press the matter. I can only hope that he did. They left us, and I was just settling the letters when 3 Christian schoolmasters arrived to pay us a call, and fresh tea was brought. They took their calling seriously and talked with enthusiasm, although they were without original ideas on the subject, and poured out the platitudes they had been taught. A government schoolmaster is not required to think independently. However, they were, I feel sure, doing good work. When they left us, and that was late, A and I ate our supper and then escaped to the roof and drank in the pure, fresh air, all aromatic with herbs. The moon was misty, but Venus sailed large in the sky, and so our minds washed free of educational theories by the lovely moon-drenched expanse of silent hills. We went to bed knowing that in every Yazidi house that night water was being heated. Every Yazidi house at night, water was being heated. For after the great sacrifice of lambs and kids comes the big wash, which is none other than the familiar purification of the spring feast. Throughout the feast ran true to the immemorial type. Therefore, in every house, Yazidis cleansed their bodies from head to foot in preparation for the morrow. Mourning, sacrifice, symbols of resurrection, purification by water, all the ancient threads were present in a pattern I knew well. And making sure that you take a full bath for the festivals is also something that one has. And